Hey everybody, here's another one of these dumb walks down memory lane. But this one's great because we've got Tom Spina, who everybody has asked if I'm going to have featured. And out of everybody on the RPF, I can honestly say with a clear conscience that Tom is like the local boy made good with his just general vibe and career. So, hey, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hello, Jason. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Woo. That was very nice of you. And as promised, I will send you that $5 check and a coupon for a free sub.
Yeah. Yes. Dope. Awesome.
And speaking of subs, hey, everybody who's watching, make sure you like and subscribe. No,
like and subscribe. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, you know, I thought, you know, I've only seen the one video so far, you and Brian. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And I'm honored to be asked to talk about this stuff. I mean, the RPF was super important to me for a long time. And I think, you know, so many folks, and it's kind of neat now to take a little bit of a look back. It doesn't feel like we should be looking back. Like, I know, you know, some of us, I'm not going to say we're old, but like some of us aren't as young as we used to be.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's weird to even think about, like, you know, hey, let's look back at the RPF. And I'm like, that's, how do you look back at now? You know, like,
right,
it feels,
right.
Isn't that like last week? You
yeah,
know?
It feels very natural and not necessarily linear.
Is it 25 years?
Yes.
Since, like,
don't dwell on it. Don't think about it too much. Just think about the cell phone you probably didn't have when you joined the RPF.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think I actually even got a cell phone until like really well into the 2000s. I was very cell phone resistant at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's see here. I mean, I was very, very early in all of that stuff. Like, I was on the AOL boards.
Yeah, you predate me enough that you might have even been a mod. If you weren't a mod when I joined in like 97, 98, you were definitely like a presence where I was like, this guy's one of the you know, the state elders. You were Wampa, right? I mean, you never really changed your handle.
Wampa. Yeah. So, and the reason I had that handle was because there was a local comic and toy shop called Mucktime Toys.
Yes.
We're still around doing amazing stuff. Paul's awesome. Love them. And they had a little shop, and I came in one day and someone had made him some Jawas, and they had like literal felt cloaks, you know, like brown felt for the cloaks.
Cool.
And they were all like pristine, brand new Jawas, and they were all skinny, and they were just made like, they were basically 2x4s with eyes and a robe. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I was like, hey, Paul, you know, I could probably like make these look pretty cool. You know, can I take one home for a weekend or something? He's like, sure. I brought it back and he's like, oh, it looks like I got hit by a sand crawler. And I'm like, is that a good thing? He's like, yeah, you take the rest of them. So I took the rest home and I dirtied them up and everything. And then he's like, can you make anything else? What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. He goes, could you make a Wampa? Sure. You know?
Yeah.
So I made him a life-size Wampa for his store.
Wow.
And he loved it. And then it was like, oh, could you make me a couple Tusken Raiders? Oh, could you make me this? Could you make some Ewoks? Could you do that? And it just, you know, snowballed. But the Wampa being the one, like my first real, like, paid gig kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I always loved the Wampa anyway. Like, so it just was like, okay, yeah, that'll be my handle.
Yeah. So okay. So you find the listserv, the AOL board.
I'm sorry. Is that blood on your hands?
Yes. No. It's paint. I was painting. In fact, I have cleaned my shop for the first time in 6 months, and decided that I was going to paint this little Animal Crossing figure of my wife's favorite character. So it's a chicken, and so this was the red parts of the chicken that I laid down this afternoon.
I feel like this is the point in the Netflix documentary where they pause and the announcer goes like, "It was not, in fact, paint."
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So and then roll the file or the CCTV footage of me doing something horrible.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I come to this. What is your background? Are you an artist? Are you
Oh,
you've been into Star Wars. You watched it as a kid. How old are you?
Yeah.
Like, did it sort of like go into hibernation and then come to the forefront with internet?
No, it never went away for me.
Wow.
I was, 5 years old when I saw Star Wars the first time, I think. And prior to that, I was King Kong. It was Mighty Joe Young. It was The Wizard of Oz. It was fantastic things that I saw that were in movies that I wanted to, recreate in some way. And especially once they started showing behind the scenes specials on Star Wars, that was the end of it for me. That was 5-year-old Tom telling my mom, like, Mom, this is what I want to do. And she's like, but you're 5. You don't know what you want to do. And I'm like,
yeah. Well, you and I, just as a quick aside, you and I have talked about this before. We have very parallel, like, tracks with our passion. I wanted to work at ILM and make the models. I'm 48. I was 4 when it came out, and I didn't see it until the re-release when I was like 5, or maybe I was 4 when it was re-released. Whatever. Similar age. But like, all I wanted to do when I grew up was make the spaceships and blow them up. And you, as said, you were the same, but with like the creatures,
the monsters. It was
crazy.
Chewbacca and all those Cantina monsters and the chess monsters and Jabba the Hutt eventually, and all of those creatures. And it's just, I mean, that's Wonderland for me, like that Cantina scene alone. How many monsters are in there? And
smorgasbord.
And even as a kid though, it was everybody wanted to be Luke Skywalker, everybody wanted to be Han Solo, and I'm like, I want to be Stuart Freeborn, I want to be Rick Baker. It's little kid, there's no career path for this, especially back then. There's no YouTube to find out how to do anything. There's no internet. I would go to the library to find books on puppets. Muppets, that was another huge thing for me. Muppets blew my mind. And again, it was a behind the scenes special that hooked me. Like, I thought Sesame Street was cool. I loved the Muppet Show. But when there was a behind the scenes of the Muppets that came out, of Muppets and Men, that blew my mind to watch this happen, this magical dance under the stage, as all this chaos occurred. And to think, like, someone built all of that. Someone figured out how that worked. Someone figured out how to shoot this. And so I would be making puppets. I would be doing stop motion videos with my action figures. I would be making, clay sculptures of things, whatever I could get my hands on. And I would just watch the behind the scenes footage and try and do it. Not the best way to learn, because now we look back at the behind the scenes footage and you always see, like, oh, I know exactly what happened. Someone with a camera came into the makeup department. They set up 4 people around one table, each grabbed a completely finished thing and an inappropriate tool, and just stands there going like this while the camera's on, making it look like they're working.
It was so funny talking to, I think Lauren and Richard Edlund have talked about it. Star Wars was way more popular than they expected. They needed a making of. They had taken no real usable footage. So I think it was in 78, they did what all those guys refer to as the faking of the making of. And you can tell because they're all wearing Star Wars shirts, and those shirts literally did not exist when they were doing things. And it was soon enough after that it was all still there in Van Nuys. So all that footage of Richard with the control on the Dijksterflex, with the Falcon that's all replicated a year later. None of that's real. And even funnier. Sense, though. Because there was a hunger for it, and it's valid. Funny enough, at the time it tickled them, but like now you're like, it's only less than a year later maybe. So to us, like, it's still vintage and perfect.
Same thing,
Yeah. But then you look at all those photos, like, they love taking an airbrush and going up to a model and there's no hose. Like, that was their favorite thing to do. And it always reminds me of seeing a band on like Top of the Pops where they're lip syncing to the song and they're being kind of cheeky, and the drummer's just doing this in the air. They're like, you guys know this isn't real, right? Like we're gonna make sure that you know that.
They get it.
And that carried over, I think, to at least, I'm sure it's still happening, but I know that, like, there's a couple pictures, I think, of John Goodson working on the prequels, and clearly they're not really doing anything. But
there's a great shot from Empire where they have the Wampa arm and Snaggletooth's head, because they reused Snaggletooth in the background of Bespin, and a couple other things. And Graham Freeborn has the finished Snaggletooth head that was in Star Wars and then redone for the holiday special. And he's got a sculpting tool on it. It's like here's the finished piece.
That thing's been done for 3 to 4 years now, buddy. Yeah. That's great.
Exactly.
That's so great.
Awesome.
But to speak to that, you eventually, like, just your personal journey, you ended up befriending those guys, right? You went to England. Like,
yeah, I got very lucky to, and maybe this is, so we all obviously owe a debt to Brandon Allinger for his role in getting the RPF
huge.
started.
Yeah.
And so that was actually how I got introduced to the RPF. So I found Brandon's site where it was the prototype for the Parts of Star Wars site that Chris Trevis and Chris Rife do.
Nice.
It was a very small site. I remember it having like a black background and probably yellow and white text. That's like all that really flashes on me.
Yeah.
And it just was like Princess Leia's blaster was made from this gun. The Stormtrooper blaster was made from a Sterling. Blah 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 blah. And it was very, basic starter information on the parts that went into these things, and that was the stuff I loved. Like, you figuring out the right found part to something and knowing that that's 90% of the way to a prop replica. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
So I believe it was through that site, that was post AOL or maybe parallel, but the AOL boards I was going and I was just looking for stuff. I made stuff, but I always also collected, as but this is just like the extra stuff that I put in the office shelves. That's not even the real collection. But that's the I would build stuff because I just wanted to have it. Like, it was like, oh, it'd be really cool to have a lightsaber, a Luke lightsaber. Yeah. And then to find out, like, oh, I could buy a Graflex from a camera shop and make a Luke saber out of it. Like, that's really cool. Pardon me. So finding Brandon's site was great for that. And then that introduced me to the prototype RPF that was on the Star Wars versus Titanic boards. And that's like 97, 98, whatever. That's the area where I am, kind of, and maybe it's even 99, but I think it was 98.
I'm pretty sure you were there before me. Yeah.
But Brandon also was, just the Indiana Jones of the prop community. You know what I mean? Yep. Like, this is a guy going to the corners of the earth and literally digging in the ground for screen used props.
Yes.
But he made this great, kind of shameless in a good way effort to reach out and befriend and get to know folks that worked on these movies that we loved. Yeah. And it inspired me as well. And, through that, I got to meet Stuart Freeborn and Kay. Through, various efforts of my own, I got to connect with guys like Doug Beswick, John Berg, and Phil Tippett, and, and of course, Don Bees and all of that whole generation too. Yeah. And even Dennis. And it's just, through the, and Rick Baker, which to me, idol of idols, like how it's, the cool thing there is like, it's this great combination of the work I'm doing and these people that I've known and respected and looked up to forever. Yeah. And having, real reason to kind of connect with them, but then just to have that become something more is just amazing to me. And it's, on the work side of it, it's obviously great, but on a personal side, like, it's just so rewarding to be able to, connect and have a conversation with these guys. Or, when you're stumped on something and you're trying to figure it out and you go like, oh, right, I can ask Phil about that. Like, that happens.
That's trippy. Yeah.
We were working on that chess set for Regal Robot, and, we're working with the digital files that Phil and his team did for Force Awakens, scanning all the real props and everything. And like, we were trying to figure out something about one of the figures. And it was like, oh, right. No, we could just like, why are we trying to, like, why are we even worrying about it? Just call Phil, There's a ton of these effects guys I've gotten to know over the years. And so for me, I'm also a huge Universal Monsters fan, Alien, Hammer Monsters, anything that's got a good rubber monster in it, I'm there. Yeah. So, it's not just those Star Wars guys, and there's great conventions like Monsterpalooza, where you have, you know, amazing effects guys that will just set up a table and sit there and talk about their work, or bring some pieces that they want to sell, or bring some pieces to show people, a portfolio, whatever, and they'll just be there. And, you know, here you are, you get to talk to all of these guys that, you know, are just inspirations. And it's such a tight-knit community, and especially at a show like Monsterpalooza, it's usually in Burbank or Pasadena. It depends on the time of year. Look it up if you like cool art and monsters and rubber masks and sculptures and things like that. It's such a welcoming show, and it's such an interactive thing, and it's like, I don't know, everybody's there for the same reason, you know, and everybody is totally just, you know, open and excited to talk about the stuff and just share their passion for all of this.
I know the pandemic has made me very much think, I've always wanted to go to Monsterpalooza. Rick Cantu, Anthony from Sideshow, you know, they're all, I see them go, they talk to me about it. They're like, you will go to Japan to go to Wonder Festival. Like, go to Monsterpalooza, ding dong. And I'm like, I know. And like, I feel like when the dust truly settles on all this stuff, I need to get my ass to Mars and like do these things. And actually, really, as a quick aside, did we meet at an Ohio prop party? Have we actually physically met in like meet space before?
Yes. So did you call it?
That's what I thought. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't remember who I've actually met in
Shanksville.
Schwanksville. Okay, it was a Schwanksville.
Hold on one second.
Yep.
Somebody will grab that. Is it Schwanksville? I always forget. But it was one of those like Pennsylvania prop parties. The only other ones that it could have been is maybe at like a Zaritsky prop party or something like that.
I think I went to a couple of those. Yeah, Dave Zaritsky. Yeah, he was the guy that like was really into Mantis. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Like he was like the self-professed like curator of unloved superheroes before the whole Marvel.
That's right. Yeah. No, he and a lot of cool James Bond stuff and all this.
He was stuff. Like on some morning show about James Bond recently-ish.
Yes, he was. And was like just the ultimate host. You know, he would have these parties every year or two. Just it was always a good time. The Pennsylvania party, I remember you had a Ghostbusters backpack that had a sound system in it. I remember being blown away by how loud it was.
It was like 40 goddamn pounds and took like
it
was all the D batteries in the world. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, so that was great though, because you'd flip that switch and it would just thunderously. It had a subwoofer in it.
Exactly.
It was
nuts. Outstanding.
Yeah,
but you know what's so funny? As an older, as a less young collector, I see Hasbro puts out their Kickstarter version or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it, I'm going like, I'll bet that weighs like 8 pounds.
It's very lightweight.
Pick those up and play with it.
I backed it because I haven't had that. I sold that pack in 2003 to fund the next Hairbrained whatever. Because
of course,
like there's a fair amount of turnover in my. I like the build. You know, that's my number one priority.
Only rent this stuff.
Yeah, it's just passing through. But that HasLab thing, I have wanted a pack to like just hang on the wall and be cool. Like I don't cosplay, so it doesn't need to be like crazy robust. And I was like, for the price, I don't think I could make one. Like, I'm just gonna buy it. I've already got the wand. Yeah. Like,
dude, it's one of those where it's like, and I backed it as well because it's like for the price. You're never going to get anywhere near that. And if you want to spend some time and literally have some fun over a weekend, punching it up, you can do that, you know? And I just thought like, you know what? It's like, I've always wanted to get a pack. It was never something I was going to throw the money at. I needed to get a screen accurate pack. And I didn't want one that weighed a ton. So it was just like, all right, there we go. Beautiful wall hanger, and it'll be something fun to play with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's we live in an age of wonder. Sometimes I forget about it.
Yeah. I
think we all take it for granted a little bit.
It's always fascinating to me to see people who see something like that and then say like, is Hasbro out of their mind with this price? And I'm like, I thought the same thing, but in the other direction.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's because you and I have been around the block and we know what it takes to make these insane things.
Yeah.
So you've established that you know all these people that they're like your heroes essentially, right?
100%.
Yeah, when you talk to them, they're treating you like a peer, probably, right? Like
Yeah, you talk shop.
Yeah. Have any of them said like you're like the next like generation, you're the keeper of the torch kind of thing? Like
I mean, I remember.
I know you hate talking about things that way. It's sort of like a humble thing. But at the same time, you're 20 some odd years into this, it happens, and it's like I know I've wrestled with that.
Yeah, it does feel it's like such a good feeling, just honestly, just to be up here, just to be, legitimately in the business, and to be doing things, and we've got the kind of there's this added angle to the stuff we do where we're restoring the original props, so there's Tom Spina Designs and there's Regal Robot. Regal Robot has a license with Star Wars and Disney, and we do all this cool replica stuff and cool decor and fun stuff. And go to the regalrobot.com website and check it out and buy stuff. Tom Spina Designs, it's a service business, so we're doing sculpture, we're doing bronzes, we're doing wax figures, we're doing theme park stuff, giant foam sculptures. But the thing we really got known for was restoring the unrestorable old movie props, taking stuff that people were saying you have to throw out and fixing it up.
Yeah.
And so that was how I got to meet Rick. So through Bob Burns, our, dear friend, Bob and Kathy, with
I know,
as they say, and all that.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I know. I died inside.
Like I could not. It's so strange too, because they've just always been there. This is decades of knowing them. Is there anyone more supportive of folks like us than them?
No, and I would go like to Bob and Kathy's house, and I'd chat with her about her photography for most of the time. Like I go with like 4 other people, and they'd all be running around like trying to do color swatches on the Sulaco and like putting on helmets, and Bob's like, hold the King Kong, and you're just like, woohoo, and I've done that, but like I would shoot the shit with Kathy about like her interest, and she'd light up like, oh, you want to talk about
right?
Like, oh my god. And I'm like, yeah, I worked in an art store for like 10 years. Like we talked about mat cutters. I was like, I have a Logan, but like that kind of stuff. And it's just people being people. It's really it's very gratifying and like natural the way that stuff happens sometimes.
Bob remains an amazing guy. Kathy was an absolutely amazing person, and fascinating, and like you said, you would go, and same here. We would go. I remember going to her. We were working on the Cantina band member bust for Sideshow.
Cool.
And it wasn't yet that project, but it was one of the earliest meetings I was having with them about doing sculpture for their licensed Star Wars replica stuff.
Yeah.
And it eventually turned into the Cantina band bust and the life-size Boba Fett statue that we prototyped for them.
Right on.
And, this is now over a decade ago, and talked to her. I was a little nervous going into the meeting, and I said that to her. And she gave me you don't be nervous. You go in there, and they got money. Don't let them tell you they don't have money.
They've got money.
Gonna do.
Yeah.
And
they should be nervous of you.
Best pep talk.
Yeah.
Like they you don't need them. And I was like, okay. She gave me this great pep talk, and that really was what I needed. It's like I was dipping a toe in a different world there, and she helped push me through the door. And
great. Was that your first like licensed replica?
That would have been the first thing that I worked on that was like, wound up officially licensed. It was me and Brian Lewis from the RPF did the sculpt on that head.
Right on.
And then Rich Crucell, who was also on the RPF, did the mold with me.
That's so great. My first like foray into licensed collectibles was Dimso hiring me to do the paint masters for Master Replicas. And I remember at the time, I think I said this in another video, I remember at the time thinking like, this is it. This is the best. Right. Like, I'm never gonna, like, this is a dream come true. And it was. Yeah. And then like, they fly you out to the ranch and you study the stuff like you've done. And you're like, this is it. Right. This is the best. This is the dream come true. Yeah. And it like this past year, I got to make a model for Lucasfilm, and they came to me. Yeah. It wasn't like I was like rallying for it, like
right
or whatever. And I'm like, what the hell is my life? Like, this is insane.
It is, and it's, you know what? Oh gosh, Yeah, it is surreal.
Yeah.
And gratifying, and it makes you feel humbled.
Yeah.
And I feel so lucky to just do this for a living, let alone to have, done all the different things I've gotten to do.
When a young buck comes at you and they're like, how do I do that? Like, I never have an answer. I'm like, I didn't set out to do any of the stuff that I did. So if you're asking me for advice, my joke, that's not literally that I'm being deadly serious. I'm always saying, like, my one phrase of advice is just don't be a dick, because so many people are awful.
And don't be awful.
I have had ebbs and flows in my journey, whatever this is, where I've been very successful and then like very unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And it just, I just ride it. I'm like, what? It's cool. Like, but like I also have said before, like, are you in a mindset where you're like, I really don't have anything to prove. I'm just going to hone my craft and just keep making what I make and loving what I love. And like, there's a fire in me, but it's not like a fire where I need people to like know that I'm legit, because apparently like I have been deemed legit, which I'm also not comfortable with. It's very
Yeah.
There's the self-deprecation, like, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it, but I'm always just like, no, I'm just a guy making stuff. Ugh.
Exactly. That's kind of where I feel. To me, there's a thing I do on interviews when somebody comes in, whether they're applying to work in the office, to be an artist, to do the highest end work we do or the lowest. I always ask people if they feel fortunate in life. And I feel like that's an important thing to me. I like people who understand the opportunities they've been given, whether or not they've been able to capitalize on them, whether or not things have broken their way. And it's funny how many people who say, yes, they do feel fortunate, and they go to tell something, it'll trigger a story of something absolutely awful that happened in their life.
Yes.
But they've taken the positive out of it. And to me, that's a really important thing. I tend to be a very optimistic person. I tend to be, I have a certain energy about me. I try and, make the best of whatever. I mean, what is restoration but making the best of what's in front of you? You know? It's probably the best metaphor for the way I do things.
I haven't done a ton of restoration work, but the work that I have done has been incredibly gratifying. I'm always honored when they come to me. It's about preserving the peace. Like I mean, any sort of, it's completely apples and oranges what you do and what I do when it comes to that stuff, because this is like, fiberglass and styrene, and you're dealing with soft, supple, rotting like materials. I think you probably have much harder challenges. Yeah, you have to stabilize things. You have to stabilize things. I just have to putty and sand a lot. But like working around and trying to preserve as much of the paint. Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting.
It's funny. You said something before though about like, people ask you for advice. How do they get through the business? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you're right though. There isn't a clear-cut path. It's funny because I've had people like, old teachers and stuff have me back to the school, and they're like, oh, talk to the kids. And I'm like, hey kids, quit school and join the Muppets. It worked for me.
Right.
Now,
also, they're like, yeah.
But that's, this is a job where there's a path, but you do have to have a bit, you have to be a problem solver. You have to have tenacity. You have to be, willing to push for what you're wanting to do. But the best way to get a job doing anything is to do it, So it's like, whenever I'm trying to hire people, I'm bringing in people who are already doing good work. And that's where the RPF, I think, was such a great place. And I think that's why so many RPF guys have done well, because here they honed their skills. They did stuff. They showed things off. They learned how to interact with other artists and, bear critique. And now you have an amazing portfolio to show an employer just because you were on this board and you found out what parts were used to make a Stormtrooper blaster.
Yeah. It really was a weird training ground for things that you could never articulate, like intent wise. So you were a moderator during the Wild West era of the RPF for a fair amount of time. How did you become a mod? Did someone ask you? Were you tricked into it? Did you enjoy it? Do you have any insane stories you can? I'm sure you have crazy stories.
I mean, it's I remember, so I was asked to help out and declined. I was working in television at the time on the technical side of things.
God, I remember that. Holy cow. Wow.
Right? Yeah, because we would talk at 2 a.m. sometimes. I would be on with Brian Lewis way late at night because he was on the West Coast and I was working the midnight shift, literally on a Grass Valley switcher so I could blow up Alderaan, I'd be putting commercials on and putting the bug in and all that stuff. But they had asked me, and this is Cliff and Nikki and I don't remember who the administrators were at the time, but
there was Gavadoc and Montagar and I don't know, were they either of them
was the other one. It was Gavin Mythos. Montagar was after my time, but
one of them is someone who no one ever ID'd. No one knows who that dude is. I'm like, who was he? And no one, we don't know. I'm like, how is that work?
It's like the Dracula cape comes up.
Right? It was James Cameron the whole time. You're like, what?
He needed a hobby.
Right. He was trolling for PAs.
It was one of those things that they asked me. I didn't have the time. They asked me. I said, I would love to help out. I really felt like I had gained a lot from being an RPF member for, at that point, 4 or 5 years, or 7 years, whatever it was.
There was a weird feel to it.
2004.
Yeah.
And like you said, I guess at the time I was sort of an elder statesman or whatever. I was one of the guys that was on there very early. Yeah. I was making. See, I had a benefit. Everybody else was making blasters. And I was sculpting monsters. Yeah. And there weren't 20 people sculpting monsters. There weren't 100 people sculpting monsters. There weren't 1,000 people sculpting monsters. There was 2 of us or 3 of us. And it was easy for me to stand out.
And you weren't a monster. You had a very metered personality, and you didn't have.
I wasn't in there to get into flame wars or anything. I was there to talk about Star Wars.
Yeah, you were level-headed, which sadly was rare. I got into plenty of fights because I was young and dumb and didn't I mean, that was also the infancy of the internet in a way. I didn't understand that it was futile to try to debate someone and then evolve into an argument, and I'm like, I could still win this, and it's like, no, you can't.
There's stuff that we saw back then that just these days would be straight up doxing and cyberbullying.
Oh, 100%.
There's stuff that if that happened now to someone in their 20s, it would be law enforcement would be knocking on people's doors.
There were so many instances of somebody, and it still happens to this day, somebody gets pissed off, changes all of their thread, all of their information to period, and then they're like, ban me, and then they leave, they flame out spectacularly. I always thought the RPF would have been a lot would have had its act together a little better if it was you were unable to edit your posts, that would have been really interesting, because there were guys that would save everything and you could go back and edit shit. You get angry and you're like, and you type something that you might regret,
taking my toys and I'm going home.
Yeah, but no, that guy saved it and he'll throw it back at your face 6 months later. There was an organized weird collection of ammunition that some of these dudes did that really
it was strange.
It was strange then. Now it seems literally insane. That's what.
And it's all over. This was fun, right? We're here for fun,
right? Right. And there's guys that will, even on Facebook, they'll come out of the woodwork every once in a while and barf a bunch of their thoughts about something because I think they feel they're not relevant and they need to make their case for shit. And then, but it's you start thinking about these patterns of behavior with these certain individuals. What did you ever make? What did you ever do?
What is your contribution here?
Some of them didn't even buy stuff. They were just there to be a monster. And I'm like, wow, that's your hobby. Your hobby is being awful. That's incredible. So I would imagine being a moderator, Like you had it was a full-time job probably some days it felt like.
It kind of felt that way at times. Yeah, it was funny. So, you know, they asked me a couple times, I declined. I didn't think I could dedicate the time to it. They said, you know what, you know, they came back again and they said, you know, just be a moderator, just do some day-to-day, help us with, you know, keeping track of stuff, moving threads into the right forums and stuff like that. And I thought, fine, I love organizing stuff. This will be great. And it was like, great, okay, here's password. This is the form. All right, bye. And everybody was gone. You know, it's like, what? Wait, what? You know, I'm probably exaggerating, but not a lot. And, you know, so that's that, you know, it's like everything else. What do I make with what's in front of me? Yeah. What can I do to reinvigorate, reinvent, come up with, you know, what's got to happen here? And so the first thing I did was I reached out to Brandon, who was not, you know, part of the administration of the board at all, but had founded it all. And I said, you know, look, he and I are good friends at this point. Like, why don't you come back on, help me just take a fresh look at this? Like, we know what your intent was. Yeah. We know what this could be. We know the good of it. We know what's bad. What can we do to reinforce the good? And so we figured out, you know, there was a need for hosting. So we got it moved onto a new hosting platform. We knew that the software was out of date and tough to manage because it was very customized. So we moved it to, you know, I think it was Envision Zone or whatever at the time. Oh, yeah. That was like a more stable, common, you know, thing. We put together a quote code of conduct to encourage folks to be a little more respectful. Yeah.
Was this when Babbage was part of it? Like, because I know Brian said for a while he was basically paying for the RPF.
That would have been after.
Okay. Okay. So this is prior to, okay. This is great.
So,
prior to that.
Yeah. So what we wound up doing was we did some, I think we started with some, I don't remember if we did donation drives or if that was the guys after us. I know we got an affiliate account with Prop Store and I think maybe Sideshow at the same time. I could be wrong. Sideshow might have been later. But, you know, the idea being, let's get some advertising in. Let's get something that covers the cost of the board. Yeah. And let's get, you know, good volunteers to help take care of stuff. And, you know, I remember there was Wayne, Prop Replicator, before he passed.
Yeah.
You know, there was me, there was Wayne, there was Brandon, there were a couple other people. We all had a great common goal and vision for it. And that was just to make it as pleasant a place as you could and to try to keep it as respectful we could on a few different levels. Because at the time, you know, you had MR out there and you had a couple of licensees who were getting a little bit unnerved by, you know, the people replicating their stuff or replicating things that were in direct competition to them.
Yes.
And, you know, there were people probably wrongly now looking back on it that would constantly, you know, hold the specter of the studios over our heads and, you know, they're going to shut you down and blah, 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 blah. Oh, people, like you said, that didn't make or contribute anything. Yeah. But you know, so I took that was when we shifted to the whole junkyard idea and where it was like, okay, if you're selling something from your collection, fine. If you're selling one thing you've made, fine. If you're going to do a run, keep that respectful, keep that off the board, show off your work, and, you know, keep your head down. And that's, I think, something that's just been lost these days.
How long were you a mod and what made you stop? Like, did you burn out or was it just time to pass the torch kind of thing?
That's a good question. You know, it was only a few years. Yes, cheers. It was in moderator time, that's like 96 years. But in real time, probably about 3. I was a mod. I was in the admin for a while. I brought in a group of guys that were pretty good to run it. And you know, combination of just the feeling of banging your head against the wall, but more so than that, you know, at that point, I really started building Tom Spina Designs and started doing the restoration work, started having, you know, something to run towards rather than run away.
Nice.
And that really became like, okay, you know, it's one thing to be playing around on the RPF when you're working for someone else. It's amazing how much more valuable your time becomes when you're the one paying yourself.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah.
So so yeah, it was one of these things where it's like, okay, let's, you know, time to focus. And you know, it's one of these things where it's definitely a little bittersweet. Like I felt like my time there was pretty good. I felt like we reinvigorated the board, especially when we first made that transition to the new software, and Brandon came back and we came out new, you know, a new kind of more common understanding of what the board was about with folks.
Yeah.
And for a while, I think it was pretty great there. And you know, it's one of these things where I'm sure you've covered this. I'm sure you kind of list the sort of local boys made good kind of thing aspect of that site. That group was, you know, it's funny. I always have these things where I look back and I wonder, like, oh, was I born too late? You know, you look at these different waves, like film first gets started and you have all these guys messing around with stuff, and then you get, like, you know, into that real golden period in the 30s and such, where all these innovations are happening, and you're like, man, it would have been so cool to be a part of that. Or then all the musical innovations in the 60s, you're like, oh man, could you imagine being around for that? Or the new reinvigoration of film in the 70s and of movie effects in the late 70s, early 80s. And you're like, could you imagine being in on the ground floor of that?
Yeah.
And, you know, then digital in the early 90s. And, you know, you kind of sit there and go, like, in a way, the RPF was its own version of that. You know, it was the gathering and the gestating of a certain generation.
Yeah.
And we were a part of that.
Yeah.
And, like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. We broke ground,
you know,
and didn't realize we were doing any of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you start to wonder, like, is that what all these guys we were talking about before, were they that way? You know, like, were they sitting there going, like, you know, oh, I was just doing my thing, and it's only later in hindsight that you realize that was important?
I think so. I mean, like, you've talked to them, like, whenever I talk to one of those guys, you know, I hold the whole thing, like, on a pedestal, and they're like, we were in our 20s and it was a hot, shitty warehouse in Van Nuys, and then it was very nice up north. But, like, they were like, we weren't, like, they knew they were making something special and good, but they certainly didn't think they were, like, making modern myth for the next generation. You know, that's a heavy mantle. Like, I mean, like, you can't set out to ever do anything like that, which I guess is part of what makes the RPF so great, is that we never set out to do any of the stuff that we ended up creating or gestating. Like, the
RPF, it was an accident. Like, that should be
an earnest accident. But you're right. Like, it really was, like, a weird, perfect time, because we are the generation that saw the birth of the internet at an age where we were, like, thank God I didn't have a permanent record of all the awful stuff I did when I was, like, a young teenager, and, like, just going through, like, puberty happened in a vacuum and it didn't happen online. Thank God. Like, so we got to, like, sort of, like, build this thing out of nothing back before it was, like, commoditized, or, you know, Facebook's so fractured, and we're all we're more savvy and more cynical about stuff.
It's like it's like the fracturing of just media in general. You know, if there was a Star Wars special on, everybody watched it because it was on CBS, and the only other channels you had were NBC, ABC, and PBS, and maybe, in our case, Pix 11, the local. You know, like, you had 5 or 6 channels that came in decently on your TV.
Fox 45, UHF,
there you go. We had
the big 3, and then the 55. Weird one. The big 3, the educational one, and the weird one. That's it.
So that's that sort of thing where, you know, the RPF existed in a time on the internet where it was the place. A little like I was the creature guy. You know what I mean? Like, it was a time where we were discovering that you could connect with other people on the internet. You could share information. You could share tips and build ideas and, you know, parts and whatever else. And then also physically start to share things, because now you've got priority mail and all this other stuff coming about in eBay. And, you know, that's a nexus, you know, like, that's a point in time that isn't ever going to happen again. And now, like you say, you go to Facebook, I don't even know how to get to half the groups that are in my Facebook feed. I have, you know, how many groups I've joined. I'm lucky if I see 3 good posts a day. Like, there's no way to get something in front of as many of the right eyes as there was back then.
In a very linear, like, I mean, fashion. There were those threads, the discovery threads and the build threads, where you were on a journey. And you know, like, the way Facebook prioritizes the feed, I miss so much, because you know, like, it's, those, I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody of barfing out pictures of food and cats, but you know, like, whatever.
As long as it's barfing up pictures of food and not pictures of barfed up food.
Right.
So but yeah, like, those discovery threads were so great to follow. You know, how the one I just remember when they found the last parts on the Obi-Wan Sabre from New Hope. Like, blows my mind that stuff is discovered. That's incredible to me.
We were talking about that, I think, in the second video with when Matt Munson joined us. Like, I vividly remember Brian said, you know, we all thought it was a motorcycle handle, and then we figured out it was a grenade. And you know, Jeff Ritzman was like, it's a fire extinguisher nozzle, because he found. I
remember that.
Yeah, and we were like, that's it. You know, we were all trying to find that, and actually, he was local enough, like, that I could, like, he showed it to me. It was like this weird pot metal, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And then, like, the booster, whatever, the gears, like, we all thought it was from a lawnmower, or
lawnmower gear,
and then there was
a heat sink.
And then from another airplane, like, and like, it was like a real sort of like rare configuration. We also thought somebody had a crazy theory that it was like this weird, like, it was like a press for like dough, or it was like this cast iron thing. Remember that? It was like somebody was like in an Amish flea market and saw it, and they were like, I think it's that. We were all like, oh my God. You know, so we all went to our local flea markets looking for
for dough presses. But, I mean, that all came around. That every part on that thing got identified is insane. That happened. You know, and that's the beauty. That really is, like, that encapsulates the good in that site. You know, that, and honestly, you know, it's like anything else. It's the people. It's that, you know, there are lifelong friends I've made just from being a part of that board. There are people now that I've had conversations with. You couldn't have conversations with anyone else in the world, because, you know, you've made that connection, and there is this deep shared passion for these parts, these props, the way things are made, the people who made them, that, you know, you are just locked in a place like this. There is a connection there that is really special. And there are friends of mine that, you know, oh gosh, I mean, there's people I work with all the time, like Rob DeNicola, who works here now with me, Richard Riley, you know, who would blow people away with his foam work back then, and now, you know, we've been working together now for 20 years making cool foam stuff for people, you know. And Brian Lewis, of course, is another one that I can, you know, even if we don't talk for 6 months, we'll pick up the phone, and then it's like, oh, well, this will be a little while, you know.
Yeah. That's great.
But just, you know, Wayne, even Graham before he passed, there were all of these people who you could. There is a connection there that doesn't just happen everywhere else. And did Graham crash his car, his kit? Yes. Holy shit! I don't remember if it was kit or not. But I do know that
he passed away in a car crash. My friend Jordan died like 2 weeks before the
oh my God,
Revenge of the Sith, I think, or one of the films. It is weird that enough time has passed that we're remembering. We have an in memoriam, like,
right? But then you look at, you know, Adam Savage was tooling around the RPF, learning how to make stuff. Dave Paya from you know, UD Replicas, and I mean, the KISS replica stuff he's doing. Like, here's a guy who, again, you know, took what he was passionate about and took what he was good at in terms of the leatherwork and getting stuff made. And, you know, it's like, you got your peanut butter and my chocolate. You know? I have so much respect for that guy. And again, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
One of the most passionate people you ever meet, and treated people right. Wasn't a dick. What do you know? It works.
It works. It works. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's one of the people I look up to that in terms of like what they've made from their time there. It's,
it's staggering.
Yeah, so many others.
I have one more question. That was probably a perfect place to end it, but I've got one more question.
No. Well, why let that stop us?
Right, exactly. Let's keep going till the sun goes down. So you are now.
Right off.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, what time is it? Yeah, the sun will be going down soon, actually. Yeah, we're East Coasters. So you are now in a position where you make things for production.
Yeah,
and
sometimes.
Yeah, you have made things for production.
Yeah.
And I too have been blessed with the opportunity to make something real for the scene, for the canon, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Do you find it hilarious that it is? So I think a lot of the reason why I make a lot of the concept stuff lately is because it's so much more creative and so much more freeing, and the palate cleanser a lot of the time. I mean, I do still take incredible joy in making try to make an X-Wing as accurate as possible, but at the same time, it's very gratifying to make something. And for me, it was always the journey of the fantasy of Joe Johnson handing me a sketch and going like, "We need it by 5, kid," and I'm like,
right.
Like that kind of thing. But like, does it amuse you to realize that it's so much easier and faster to make things up than it is to do the research and stuff like that?
Oh yeah.
It is shocking how fast it goes when you're not IDing parts and you're just pulling interesting parts.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, it's night and day. And so there's a range of stuff we've done that fits too, because we've done stuff where I've sculpted werewolves for people and or other monsters and things like that and had a free hand.
Yeah.
And then we've done other stuff where we had to replicate like the American werewolf in London, not just a werewolf.
Right.
Totally different type of sculpt. It's so you're so tight sculpting a replica versus doing that. I used to love doing bronzes. I haven't, I've got other folks to sculpt with me now, and I haven't sat down and just done a human bronze in a while. But I used to love doing those. And again, it's that palette cleanser. It's just like, okay, let's take this guy and let's see what the clay makes of him.
Yeah.
And you can be loose with it, and you just try and capture their essence, their spirit, their soul, whatever. It's like hoity-toity, but that's what you do. And making the stuff for production. A lot of the stuff we've done has been replica stuff, and so I've imposed my own sort of
course, you're your own worst enemy with getting product development. Yeah,
absolutely. But then, if you look like on Regal, we did an interpretation of Ralph McQuarrie's sketch of the original Bib Fortuna, the one that's very Jabba the Hutt.
Oh yeah, the one that showed up in Solo.
No, well,
or Mando?
No, because this is the one he's got the big hat and everything like
that. Okay. I'm thinking of the one where he kind of looks like he's got
the other thing
creepy looking
concept maquette. This is one of Ralph's early sketches. Doesn't look anything like the final Bib Fortuna. No tentacles, nothing.
Cool.
It's a super Ralphie sketch though. Like it's just Ralph-ish.
Yeah,
but it's
Ralph-like.
But it was so cool to just do that, because it's like, okay, here's this 2D thing, and let's just see what this feels like in 3D space. And me and Casey Wong sculpted that together.
Cool.
And with a little help from Sam in the shop, she helped rough it out. But I mean, it was just so cool to do that, because it was just like, okay, this is kind of, it's that sketch, but it's also what we want it to be. There's a little bit of room to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, night and day when you're doing a replica versus doing something for a production. And, even if we go outside of Star Wars stuff we've done for other things, when someone's just like, hey, make this look spacey.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Happy baby.
And it bleeds over. I mean, like, you do this all the time, I'm sure. When I make a replica, I do mostly one-offs, and I'm at a very fortunate place now where I just make whatever I want. And if somebody comes later and they're like, can I put that in my collection? I'm like, sure. It's not, I don't.
I've had my enjoyment of it. It's sat on my shelf.
Yeah, I don't have.
I can go sit on your shelf.
Yeah, I don't take commissions or any of that kind of stuff. But like I feel very lucky that I don't have to, and that I don't want to, because now my inner muse can go bananas and just make whatever.
Right. No, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
But a lot of times, like, I have, and I think it's probably an influence of knowing the original guys that worked on all these things and them saying like, it looks that way because we had 6 hours before it needed to be on stage. Like,
yeah,
what are you guys doing? Like, they think we're nuts. And I've relaxed a lot over the years. And I build now to hold up to a closer scrutiny. We had to do that a little bit with MR. I remember the RPF had these like theories. They're like, you have to change it 7%, like for license. And I'm like, no, the goal is always to make it exact. I remember like having a very fierce debate with Chris Gallagher, like standing over a Chronicles book in one of the Y-Wings of the archives. Like, no, like I know that the two things are flipped, but on the one that we want to make, it should be like that. You just don't have it here. It's on tour. It's in this picture.
Right.
And as long as you could show the license guy the picture, they're like, all right, cool. But, but to them, they're like, it just needs to look like this. And I'm like, this is sort of, but it's that. So like, there was always an effort to make it accurate. But at the same time, if you make it accurate, like truly accurate to the prop, no one's going to want to buy it because it's terrible. So like, yeah. So I've like been finessing like my like presentation of things. Like weathering has changed over the years, and I find it really funny that a lot of the new guys in the scene are very programmed into the like almost paint by number, like I need it to look like this prop. And I'm like, the prop that's been sitting under UV light for 40 years and is really shifted and has been dropped, and there's a crack and they glued that on wrong. Like,
you know what? So I mean, here's a perfect example of a theory of mine, which is accuracy of style, where there are certain things. Let's just say spatter, for instance. You're never going to capture every dot in a spatter pattern, but you can spatter it in the same style. You can get roughly the same vibe. There has to be, you have to paint with a level of looseness. If you paint tight, it's going to look fake. If you paint loose, it looks better. When we did something like our Rancor replicas for Regal Robot, we worked really hard to come up with a paint scheme for that was accurate in style. And now maybe it's not dot for dot exactly how the real thing, is, but man, it's really close, but two, it is painted the same way and has the same feel, so that, even under close scrutiny, it feels right. You look at it and it looks like it's painted like a prop. It doesn't look like it's painted like a statue. If we were painting a statue of it, we would do it totally different. I'm going like this because my copy is right over there. Like you can see it. Right.
But I think you could also make the case that there's only 10 guys in the world out there that are going to demand that the Boba Fett helmet have that thumbprint on it. Like, so it's like, you're not catering to them. And they're usually the loudest online, or the perception is,
there is always a trade-off of like, how do we make this look and feel like the prop, but hold up to that greater scrutiny of someone who's going to put it on their shelf and get this close to it. As opposed to something that went by on screen like that, and that's the balancing act. And that's a place that we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, how close can we get this to the real prop? How warts and all can we go without making it so warty that nobody wants it?
Right. Yeah, like I think when we scanned the Fett helmet all those years ago at MR, we thought it was the hero, but I was very swiftly put to right. Whatever. Like, dude, we tried. Like, come on. That was such a dramatic thing, but it's something that I can be teased about now, so that's cool.
But there's so much more access nowadays to information, to photos, to things like that. Like, you guys legitimately were like figuring stuff out back then, and like, it's not uncommon for people not to have known those things back then.
Right.
Like, it's so easy now in hindsight for kids and I say kids, I mean the people like us that are, but like, it's so easy for folks to look back and go like, how did you not know that was the hero? It's like, trust me, if you were there at the time, you would know. It was very easy to make that mistake.
Yeah, like if I could travel through time, part of me is like, just go back to like 2002 or 3 with the knowledge of the studio stuff you have now, back when I could like take a billion photos and measure and like hold things with impunity. Or go back to the 90s when Don ran it and you could like, dress up and like run around or whatever. But like I feel like we've always, everyone across the board, whether it's professional or amateur, everybody always just tried their best to make the best thing possible.
Yep.
Whether it was, sometimes it was altruistic and sometimes it was just like, I got to make money, like.
Right.
But I feel like the RPF really raised a bar and pushed everyone to make it good, because there were so many people sharpening knives at every corner that would tell you that it's wrong. You were like,
you
like,
learned to weather critique on the RPF.
Yeah. And I love creative criticism. I love a good critique. I don't love being like screamed at necessarily.
Right.
But that doesn't really happen anymore, really. So, but man,
well, I think you're spot on there, and I think it beyond it straight up inspired people. I mean, it was an inspiring place to go. I would go there and I would see other people's work. And hello, kitten.
Jabba the Hutt here. Yeah. Oh, little boy.
But I would see other people's work and I would get inspired. I would see other people's work and I would reach out to them. That's how I met Rich Riley. Was he had posted the Jabba the Hutt that he did, and I was like, here's a great style replica. Here's a guy who, that's not wrinkle for wrinkle what Jabba the Hutt was, but damn, if that didn't feel like the real prop the way no one else had ever done before. And I was like, this guy gets it. I want to be his friend. I called him up and we started talking and we haven't stopped since.
I just got something in today. Hang on. I need to show it to you. So I was powerless to resist this licensed shirt, which sadly I got from Hot Topic. So, I felt like a, like
ancient
child, but
oh God.
Isn't that great?
So that's
go.
amazing to me as someone who often has long discussions about what we're able to do in the licensed space and not. I'm impressed that someone got that through, and I had tips to whoever was at that pitch meeting. Yeah,
you're fighting the good fight, and somebody's like, "Dude, what if it was a taco, but also Jabba the Hutt?" And they were like,
"It's like
more." Yeah.
That's the sort of concept art that comes with like $100 bill under it and gets slipped across the table. Like, what about this?
Maybe they did it like at a Mexican restaurant or something over tacos, and somebody was just like, God, I love tacos. And they were like, well, have I got the idea of the Century Frito? Although I did buy it like at a discount, so perhaps it wasn't the
maybe it wasn't the hit that we all thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody at home, check your Hot Topics, see if they've got any in the discount rack.
Yeah, Taco the Hutt, Jabba the Taco. Oh my God, so good.
Weird.
Yeah, and like I'm assuming you've seen the latest episode of Book of Boba Fett.
Yes.
Yeah. Like it's just so funny. I have to get up. I get up early anyway, but I have to get up early, watch it before I do anything because I know.
Right. Yeah. No, you're spoiled immediately.
Yeah. Which is so weird. So like Star Wars is now this 5 a.m. thing that I do, over coffee. Because I'm like an early bird now. I used to be a night owl, but anyway. So like I watch it. And I can't wait to talk to friends about it. Like like a couple things like strike me. I love that Amy Sedaris says Mando in a Baltimore accent. That kills me. She's like Mando, and I'm like, they sound like all my neighbors. Like that's nuts.
Right.
I loved the Naboo. I've always liked the Naboo starfighter, and I love that it was hot rodded. And I just had this thought. I was like, if I open Facebook all day, it's going to be nothing because I'm a model guy. So a lot of the feed, it's going to be nothing but people working on, like, I was like, right now there's like 20 dudes in SketchUp with the sweat running down their face.
Right. Yeah.
Making, and oh my God, it's been nothing but that since Wednesday. Like, everybody brought their old snap tight kits out of storage.
Meanwhile, all the licensees are watching the show with a notebook and like writing down time codes of things like, oh, that could be interesting. Oh, let's talk about that. Let's talk about this. Yeah. And maybe in a year, someone will see what we just talked about.
Yeah. But a couple people messaged me and they're like, are you going to build one? And I was like, I don't have to, dude. Like, all I have to do is sit back and wait.
Somebody's got that.
You're like, I've got other fish to fry. It's like, somebody will do it. It'll be licensed. It's like, I'll wait for studio turnarounds or like for somebody to make one from the original asset licensed. Sure.
Right.
But I love that. I love that thing. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. So we're spoiled. Like we've got Star Wars on our televisions now.
All the time. when we first picked up the license, it was just after Force Awakens. And I'm like, okay, they just announced, basically a new Star Wars movie every year for the foreseeable future. And, all this talk of this other stuff. And I'm like, seems like a pretty good time to get in the Star Wars business.
Yeah.
And to sit there and have people, they're picking apart the stuff, whatever. It's like, look, I get it. I always use the Star Trek analogy when people are like, oh, you didn't like such and such. And I'm like, look, a lot of people didn't like Star Trek 5. But it doesn't mean they're not a Star Trek fan. It doesn't mean they didn't love Star Trek 6 or Star Trek 2 or Star Trek 3, which is my favorite. It's a little goofy, but I love it. The one with the whales, Star Trek 4, love it as well. But Star Trek 2, yeah, sure, it's the best. Anyway, I digress. I'm still a Star Trek fan, even if there's a movie that I thought wasn't, was a miss.
Yeah.
You can love a property and not love every episode of every show.
Yeah.
It's like it's an amazing time to be playing in the Star Wars sandbox, and for us to be doing it in the space we are, both the license stuff and doing some of the stuff for the productions, and to be in the circles we are, I'm the luckiest kid around. Like for us, when those episodes come up, I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to watch it as soon as I can, but then I just come to work to discuss it.
Right.
And it's like, and I can tell people like, no, we're not just talking at the water cooler about something. We're working.
Yeah.
Oh, and that timer was not for me to go, but I do. That was.
You do have to go.
I have something on the 3D printer that's a new product that I got to pull off.
Ooh.
And get some photos up for Lucasfilm.
Nice.
But it's just.
But that was a great place to end it, I think, because like you're doing what you love,
and lucky kids right now.
Yeah. And it's an extension.
Don't ever forget that.
Yeah. It's the extension of all the connections and friendships and experiences.
It really does. Look, for me, I can trace it all the way back to, King Kong in the 70s. Seeing that on Channel 9 every Thanksgiving. But it continued from there. Star Wars made it blossom. The Muppet Show, getting to work at Sesame Street, going into television. All of this stuff kept that flame alive in the background as I'm building stuff, making monsters, making cool stuff. And the RPF was what made it possible. 100%. It is what made it possible for me to do what I do now. Yep. I would not be doing this without the RPF. And it was not just the site and being able to connect with people that wanted what I was doing, but it was the lifelong friendships I made there. It was the stuff I learned there. It was the... it was a special time that's never going to come around again. It's still a great place. I'm so glad that it still exists, but I'm so happy and proud to have been a part of it. I'm very proud that I got to be a shepherd for it for a little while as well, and breathe, I think, a little bit of life into it at the time I was there, I hope. I feel fortunate. I feel great that, like just the two of us, this is, it's always great to catch up. And that's because of the RPF. It is.
Well, this is, I'm ending it there, dude, because that was fantastic. Like,
all right, cool.
Stopping the recording.